Well, America, gather round. Because it seems while we were all busy arguing about, I don't know, the correct way to load a dishwasher, something rather significant happened. It involves China, trade, and a number so big, it makes your annual screen time look modest. Reports from the Commerce Department released just last week showed a staggering 700% increase. Yes, you heard that right. 700%. This isn't a Black Friday sale on a slightly dodgy TV. This is a surge in Chinese high-tech exports to the US in the first quarter of 2025. Meanwhile, our own exports in similar sectors, let's just say they took a nosedive. A truly spectacular, Olympic-level dive, straight into an empty pool. This isn't just a blip, it's not a statistical anomaly. It's the sound of a very large, very well-played economic violin, and guess what? We're not even in the orchestra. We're apparently the audience that paid premium ticket prices to watch our own pockets get picked. This 700% figure, specifically tied to advanced microchips and renewable energy components, suddenly appeared. It blindsided analysts, it shocked policymakers, and it probably made a few American CEOs cry into their very expensive lattes. How, why, and who let this happen? These are the questions currently bouncing around Washington like a confused tumbleweed in a hurricane of regret. The initial reaction was, predictably, disbelief. Surely that's a typo, one senator allegedly muttered, probably while spilling his coffee. But no typo, the numbers were triple-checked, they were audited, they were probably even whispered to a sleeping economist to see if they'd wake up screaming. They are, unfortunately, very real. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet, this is about jobs. This is about innovation. This is about who gets to design the future. And right now, it looks like the blueprints are being drafted in Mandarin, not English. The alarm bells aren't just ringing, they're playing a full-on death metal concert in the halls of American industry. And the truly delicious, or rather terrifying, cherry on top of this whole mess, it seems this all stems from a trade deal. A deal that was supposed to be a triumph. A deal hailed by some, not naming names, but he had very distinctive hair and a penchant for gold decor, as the best ever. It turns out best ever might have been a slight exaggeration, or to put it mildly, a catastrophic misjudgment. The kind of misjudgment that makes you wonder if the negotiations involved a Ouija board instead of, say, actual trade experts who can read beyond the first page of a document. This is less art of the deal and more art of the international faceplant. So, America is shocked. Shocked, I tell you, like finding out your quiet, unassuming neighbor has been training squirrels to commit bank fraud. The news of this trade imbalance, this 700% Trojan horse, hit the headlines, and the national mood went from cautiously optimistic about Tuesday to full-blown existential crisis. People are worried, and frankly, they have every right to be. When you hear that the economic equivalent of a sneak attack has just occurred, it tends to spoil your morning cornflakes. The surprise isn't just that it happened, but the sheer scale of it, and the dawning realization that someone, somewhere, was asleep at the wheel, possibly dreaming of beautiful clean coal. The concern isn't just limited to Wall Street types who use words like arbitrage in casual conversation. This is Main Street stuff. This is about whether your local factory stays open. It's about whether the next generation of tech jobs will be in Toledo, Ohio, or Tianjin, China. Suddenly those arcane trade policy discussions that usually make people's eyes glaze over are front-page news, and everyone's asking the same question. How did the self-proclaimed greatest deal maker get so thoroughly, comprehensively, and spectacularly outmaneuvered? It's like watching a magician who promises to pull a rabbit out of a hat, but instead pulls out a subpoena for his own arrest. This isn't just about money though, oh no, it's much juicier than that. It's about trust. Trust in our leaders, trust in our negotiators, trust in the idea that America isn't just a giant, easily duped consumer market waiting to be exploited. The current administration is scrambling, pointing fingers, and promising investigations, which is great. We all love a good investigation. It's Washington's favorite pastime, right after fundraising and pretending to understand how TikTok works. But investigations don't magically undo a cleverly worded clause buried deep within a multi-hundred-page trade agreement that few probably read in its entirety. The shockwaves are also hitting American businesses. Companies that had banked on a level playing field are now looking at a landscape tilted so sharply it's practically a cliff face. They're worried about competing with Chinese firms that now have a government-engineered superhighway into the US market, while they themselves face a congested, pothole-ridden dirt track into China. This is the kind of imbalance that doesn't just hurt profits, it cripples industries. It's the economic equivalent of showing up to a boxing match and finding out your opponent is wearing brass knuckles, and the referee is their cousin. Let's talk about the US economy, or as it might soon be known, China's new favorite outlet mall. This deal, the one that was supposed to bring jobs back and make America great again, seems to be doing the precise opposite. The immediate impact is a potential hollowing out of key American tech sectors. Think about it. If Chinese companies can flood our market with cheaper, state-subsidized high-tech goods, thanks to this sneaky deal, what happens to American companies trying to compete? They shrink, they lay off workers, or they simply give up and sell their patents for pennies on the dollar. It's not exactly a recipe for robust economic growth, is it? This isn't just about a few factories closing. This is about America's innovative edge. We pride ourselves on being the land of invention, the place where the next big thing is always just around the corner. But it's hard to invent the future when you're constantly looking over your shoulder, worried about being undercut by a competitor who's playing with a stacked deck. The long-term consequences could be devastating. We could see a decline in research and development, a brain drain as our best minds go where the opportunities are, and a general slide towards becoming a nation that consumes technology rather than creates it. Imagine America, the Silicon Valley of the world, reduced to just a valley, with slightly less silicon. And what about the jobs? Oh, the beautiful jobs that were promised. It turns out those promises might have been written in disappearing ink. Instead of a manufacturing renaissance, we could be looking at significant job losses in critical industries. The very industries, by the way, that are supposed to be the backbone of a modern economy. We're talking about advanced manufacturing, renewable energy, and artificial intelligence. These aren't just any jobs, these are the high-skill, high-wage jobs of tomorrow. And they might be tomorrow's jobs in Shanghai, not Sheboygan. This is what happens when trade deals are treated like reality TV show finales, all bluster and no substance. The ripple effects will be felt everywhere. A weakened tech sector means less tax revenue. Less tax revenue means less funding for public services, for infrastructure, for education. It's a vicious cycle. And it all started with a deal that was sold to the American people as a monumental victory. It's like buying a Make America Great Again hat, only to find out it was in fact made in China, and the profits are being used to fund their space program, while yours is holding bake sales to afford rocket fuel. The irony is so thick you could spread it on toast. But you probably wouldn't want to. It would taste too much like disappointment. Beyond the dollars and cents, or rather the yuan and cents, there's the matter of America's international reputation. For decades, the US has portrayed itself as the savvy global leader, the shrewd negotiator, the country that sets the rules of international commerce. Well, this little trade oopsie has put a rather large dent in that image. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, Uncle Sam isn't as sharp as he used to be. Or perhaps he was just too busy tweeting to read the fine print. Either way, the optics are, to use a technical term, not great. Other countries are watching. You can bet your bottom dollar or yuan that they are. Allies and adversaries alike are taking notes. So they're probably thinking, this is how you get one over on the Americans. Interesting. This incident could embolden other nations to try their luck, to push for more advantageous terms in their own negotiations with the US. It potentially signals a shift in the global balance of power, where America's negotiating prowess is no longer taken for granted. It's like the schoolyard bully suddenly tripping over his own shoelaces. Everyone sees it, and no one forgets. The fallout could also affect our alliances. If America is perceived as being easily outmaneuvered, or as prioritizing domestic political posturing over sound, long-term international agreements, our allies might start to question the reliability and competence of US leadership. They might begin to hedge their bets, to seek stronger ties with other powers, perhaps even China. This isn't just about one trade deal, it's about the credibility of American foreign policy. And right now, that credibility is looking a bit like a cheap suit in a rainstorm, wrinkled and losing its shape fast. This also plays directly into China's narrative. Beijing has been working hard to position itself as a responsible, rising global power, an alternative to American dominance. This trade deal, and America's shocked reaction to it, hands them a significant propaganda victory. They can point to this as evidence of their superior strategy, their patience, and their ability to operate effectively on the world stage. While America is busy with internal squabbles and short-term thinking, China is playing the long game. And in this particular round, it seems they've just shouted checkmate, while we were still trying to figure out how the horsey moves. So, what exactly is in this Dragon's Bargain, this Pandora's box of a trade deal that President Trump's team supposedly hammered out back in 2020? Well, on the surface, the Phase 1 deal, as it was grandly titled, looked like a win. China promised to buy billions more in U.S. agricultural products, energy, and manufactured goods. There were commitments on intellectual property protection, forced technology transfer, and financial services. It was all trumpeted, pun absolutely intended, as a historic breakthrough that would level the playing field. American farmers were supposed to be swimming in Chinese cash. Our factories were meant to be humming. But here's the kicker. The part that seems to have been written in invisible ink, or perhaps in a font so small only an ant with a magnifying glass could read it. Buried deep within the annexes, or possibly in a footnote to a subclause of an appendix, were provisions related to future technological cooperation and market access for emerging industries. These sounded wonderfully benign, didn't they? Like something you'd put on a brochure for a utopian tech conference. Future cooperation, emerging industries, who could argue with that? It sounded progressive, it sounded collaborative. It turns out, these vague phrases were the Trojan horse. According to analysts now frantically dissecting the agreement, these clauses contained language that, under specific future conditions which have now apparently been met, granted Chinese companies preferential access for certain high-tech exports. The conditions were cleverly tied to China meeting certain unrelated domestic policy targets, which they diligently did, while U.S. attention was, shall we say, elsewhere. Think of it as a time-release capsule of economic pain designed to go off years later, long after the celebratory press conferences had faded from memory. It was a masterpiece of strategic patience and ambiguous wording. The deal also reportedly lacked robust, easily triggerable enforcement mechanisms for these specific tech-related clauses. While there were mechanisms for, say, agricultural purchase shortfalls, the sections on future tech seemed to be based more on goodwill and vague promises of dialogue. And as we all know, dialogue in international diplomacy can often mean we'll talk about it until you get bored and go away. So when China ramped up its tech exports under these newly activated provisions, the US found itself with limited immediate recourse within the framework of that original deal. It was a perfectly legal, perfectly executed exploitation of our own short-sightedness. So who were the masterminds behind this negotiating coup for China? On the Chinese side, you had seasoned trade negotiators. Bureaucrats who have spent their entire careers studying international trade law, American economic policy, and presumably, the art of keeping a straight face while offering a deal that's almost too good to be true, for them, anyway. These weren't flamboyant personalities. They were quiet, meticulous, and incredibly patient. They understood that trade deals aren't just about the headlines they generate today, but about the economic realities they create for decades to come. They played the long game, focusing on intricate details and future possibilities. On the American side, during the Trump administration, the negotiating team was led by figures like Robert Lighthizer and Steven Mnuchin. They were under immense political pressure to deliver a win for a president who had made trade a cornerstone of his populist appeal. The focus was often on big, headline-grabbing numbers rather than the less glamorous but arguably more important structural details and long-term implications of every single clause. It's possible that, in the rush to declare victory and move on to the next rally, some of those devilish details were overlooked or underestimated. Who benefits? Well, that's painfully obvious, isn't it? China, and, let me check my notes. Yes, China. They get massively increased access to the US market for their burgeoning high-tech industries. This helps them achieve their Made in China 2025 goals, aiming for global leadership in key technological sectors. It provides a huge boost to their economy, creates high-value jobs, and enhances their technological self-sufficiency. They effectively managed to use a trade deal, initially designed by the US to curb their economic power, as a springboard to accelerate their ambitions. That's like using the enemy's cannon to launch your own victory parade. And who got the short end of the stick? Well, if it isn't already abundantly clear, that would be us. The United States. American tech companies face subsidized competition, American workers face potential job losses. The US economy faces a strategic setback in critical future industries. The deal, which was supposed to rebalance the trade relationship, seems to have, in this specific and crucial area, tilted it even further in China's favor. It's a stark reminder that in international negotiations, the loudest voice doesn't always win. Sometimes it's the quiet, persistent strategist who walks away with all the marbles, or in this case, all the microchips. The turning point, the moment China truly gained the upper hand, wasn't a dramatic, table-thumping confrontation. No, it was far more subtle. It was likely hidden in the painstaking line-by-line negotiation of those seemingly innocuous clauses about future technological cooperation. Dr. Evelyn Hayes, a trade policy expert at the Peterson Institute, put it quite bluntly. The US team was focused on soybeans and tariffs. The Chinese team was focused on the next 20 years of technological dominance. They inserted language that seemed aspirational and non-binding, but which contained triggers linked to their own internal industrial policy milestones. Once those milestones were met, the aspirational became operational. It was brilliant, and frankly, we walked right into it. Think about that. While American negotiators were quite rightly concerned about immediate trade deficits and protecting existing industries, Chinese negotiators were embedding time bombs. They were essentially saying, okay, we'll buy your chickens, lots and lots of chickens. But also, if we happen to say, become world leaders in quantum computing by 2024, could you just sign here to agree that our quantum computers get preferential market access? It sounds absurd when you put it like that, but that's essentially the level of strategic foresight China employed. They linked trade concessions in the present to achieve strategic goals in the future. Another expert, Professor John Lee from Peking University, though perhaps with a slightly different perspective, was quoted in the Global Times saying, "This agreement reflects a mutual understanding of evolving economic strengths. China has simply met the agreed-upon conditions through its own diligent development," which is a wonderfully diplomatic way of saying, we told you what we were going to do, you signed off on it, and now we've done it. What's the problem? This highlights a key difference. China saw the deal as a dynamic document, part of its long-term industrial strategy. The US perhaps saw it as a more static fix to current problems. The key moment was the quiet acceptance of vague, forward-looking language by the US side, possibly without fully modeling all potential future scenarios. Maybe they thought China would never meet those internal milestones so quickly. Maybe they thought those clauses were just symbolic fluff. Whatever the reason, that oversight, that lack of aggressive due diligence on future-proofing the agreement, was the precise crack through which China drove a high-tech 18-wheeler. It was a masterclass in leveraging an opponent's short-term focus against them. As one former US trade official anonymously lamented, "We were playing checkers and they were playing Go, and they'd read our rulebook while we'd only glanced at theirs." So, what does this all mean for the future of US-China relations? Well, imagine an already awkward family dinner. Now add the fact that one cousin just revealed they secretly mortgaged the family home to fund their alpaca farm. Things are going to be frosty. Very, very frosty. This trade deal revelation will undoubtedly lead to a significant chilling of relations. Trust, already a scarce commodity between Washington and Beijing, is now practically non-existent. The US feels duped, played, and frankly a bit foolish. China, on the other hand, likely feels a mixture of vindication and strategic satisfaction, even if they publicly maintain a posture of innocent adherence to a mutually agreed-upon deal. The immediate consequence will likely be a flurry of accusations, demands for renegotiation, and possibly even retaliatory measures from the US side. The current administration, regardless of who is in power, will be under immense pressure to do something. This could mean new tariffs, sanctions on specific Chinese tech companies, or a push to rally allies to form a united front against what will be perceived as predatory Chinese trade practices. However, China is unlikely to back down easily. They will argue they acted within the letter of the agreement, and any US retaliation would be an aggressive, unwarranted act. This sets the stage for a new, more intense round of economic confrontation. This incident will also supercharge the ongoing debate within the US about decoupling from China. Those who have long argued for reducing America's economic interdependence with China will see this as Exhibit A for their case. They'll say, "See, we told you they can't be trusted. We need to bring our supply chains home, protect our technology, and treat China as the strategic competitor it clearly is." This could accelerate efforts to reshore critical industries and build alternative supply networks, even if that comes at a higher cost. The era of unbridled globalization, particularly with China, might be well and truly over. Long-term, this could solidify a new kind of Cold War, one fought not with missiles and tanks, but with tariffs, tech embargoes, and competing economic blocs. The US will need a comprehensive, coherent, and long-term strategy to deal with a China that is not just a rising economic power, but a strategically astute one. This isn't just about winning the next news cycle or the next election, it's about securing America's economic future and its place in the world for generations to come. And that requires more than just tough talk. It requires smart, patient, and incredibly diligent policymaking. Something that seems to have been in short supply when this particular deal was signed. So there you have it. A trade deal that was supposed to be a triumph has turned into a bit of a national embarrassment, with China apparently playing three-dimensional chess while we were busy, I don't know, arguing if a hot dog is a sandwich. The consequences are serious, for our economy, for our global standing, and for the future of our relationship with China. It's a wake-up call, folks. A very loud, very annoying 700% wake-up call, complete with a blaring alarm and a bucket of cold water to the face. What happens next is, to some extent, up to us. This isn't just a problem for politicians in Washington or economists in ivory towers. This affects everyone. It's about the jobs available in your town, the technology you use, and the kind of country America will be in the years to come. So it's time to get informed. It's time to ask questions. Demand accountability? Yes. But also demand smarter, more forward-thinking policies. We need leaders who not only understand the complexities of global trade, but also have the foresight to anticipate future challenges, not just react to yesterday's headlines. And maybe, just maybe, we need negotiators who actually read every single word of every single page of these massive agreements. Radical, I know. What are your thoughts on this? Are you shocked, worried, mildly amused in a dark, cynical kind of way? Share your opinions. Talk to your friends, your family, your elected officials. The more we discuss these issues, the more pressure there will be to find real solutions, not just quick fixes or scapegoats. Understanding foreign policy and trade isn't just for experts, it's a civic duty, especially when the stakes are this high. Because if we don't pay attention, who knows what other fantastic deals might be lurking just around the corner, waiting to surprise us. And if you want to learn more, there are plenty of resources out there. Look up analyses from independent think tanks, read articles from diverse perspectives, and maybe even delve into the mind-numbingly dull but incredibly important world of actual trade agreement texts. It might not be as thrilling as the latest superhero movie, but I assure you, the long-term drama and real-world consequences are far more significant. America's future isn't just going to happen to us. We need to actively shape it, starting now. And perhaps next time, we bring a better magnifying glass to the negotiating table. Just a thought.